February 19th, 1945. 0900 hours. Beach Red 1, Iwo Jima. Corporal James Roberson of Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 23rd Marines hit the black volcanic sand and immediately understood why the island was called Sulphur Island. The beach wasn't sand at all. It was pulverized volcanic ash mixed with fragments of obsidian that cut through boot leather. The air tasted like rotten eggs. Smoke from the 72-day naval bombardment mixed with steam venting from cracks in the earth itself. The landing craft ramp dropped. Roberson's squad ran forward into what appeared to be silence. That silence lasted exactly 14 seconds. Then Mount Suribachi and the entire southern face of the island erupted. Not with random fire, but with mathematically precise interlocking fields of machine gun fire, mortar barges, and artillery that had been pre-registered on every square yard of those beaches for months. The Japanese had allowed the first waves to land unopened. Now they were killing Marines in a shooting gallery designed by engineers who understood geometry better than mercy. Private First Class Donald Graves, a wireman from Headquarters Company, later described the beach in his after-action report. Bodies were piling up in the surf. The volcanic sand wouldn't let us dig. Shovels just filled with loose ash that collapsed back into the hole. Everywhere you looked, Marines were dying, and you couldn't see a single Japanese soldier. They were all underground. Iwo Jima was 8 square miles of volcanic rock sitting 760 miles south of Tokyo. The island had 3 things that made it strategically critical and tactically impossible. First, 2 airfields with a third under construction, positioned perfectly to support B-29 raids on the Japanese home islands. Second, radar stations that gave Tokyo 2 hours advance warning of every American bombing raid. Third, 21,000 Japanese defenders commanded by General Tadamaki Kurabayashi, a man who had studied American tactics and decided to fight a battle unlike any the Marines had ever faced. Kurabayashi had spent 8 months transforming Iwo Jima into a fortress that existed almost entirely underground. His men had carved 11 miles of tunnel through solid volcanic rock. They had built 1,500 rooms deep enough to survive naval bombardment. They had positioned 361 artillery pieces, 65 mortars, 33 large naval guns, and over 200 machine gun positions in bunkers constructed from reinforced concrete with walls 5 feet thick. The Japanese weren't planning to defend the beaches. They were planning to let the Marines land, then kill them from positions the Americans couldn't see, couldn't reach, and couldn't destroy with conventional weapons. The 4th and 5th Marine Divisions hitting those beaches on D-Day faced an opponent who had rejected every conventional rule of island defense. There would be no banzai charges. No desperate counterattacks. Just cold, patient, mathematically efficient killing from reinforced bunkers connected by tunnels that allowed defenders to disappear and reappear anywhere on the battlefield. By 1800 hours on D-Day, 30,000 Marines were ashore. Over 2,400 were already casualties. The volcanic ash had immobilized tanks and vehicles. The beach was a killing zone. And somewhere in the volcanic rock ahead, invisible Japanese gunners waited with patience that would cost the Marines more casualties per square yard than any battle in their history. What the landing force needed wasn't more firepower. The Navy had already dropped 6,800 tons of bombs on the island. Battleships and cruisers had fired 22,000 shells. The problem wasn't volume. It was precision. The problem was finding and killing individual defenders hiding in reinforced positions that could survive anything except a direct hit from a weapon placed with surgical accuracy. The solution arrived in combat boots, carrying rifles that looked almost identical to standard-issue weapons, but weren't. These were the scout snipers. Men trained to kill at distances where most riflemen were spraying and praying. Men who understood that on Iwo Jima, one precisely placed shot could save a dozen Marine lives. This is the story of how American snipers fought a different kind of war on that volcanic nightmare. How they learned to kill an enemy they couldn't see. How they developed tactics that would become doctrine. And how they paid in blood for every lesson learned on the most hostile battlefield in the Pacific War. The Invisible Enemy. February 20th, 1945. 0630 hours. 400 yards inland from Beach Yellow 1. Sergeant William Daly of Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 24th Marines was pinned behind a destroyed Sherman tank that would never move again. His platoon had been trying to advance 50 yards for 3 hours. They couldn't. Every time a Marine moved, machine gun fire erupted from somewhere ahead. Nobody could identify the source. The fire was coming from the volcanic rock itself. Daly's platoon had already lost 8 men. 6 wounded, 2 dead. They hadn't seen a single Japanese soldier. The problem was simple and impossible. General Kurabayashi had rejected the traditional Japanese defensive doctrine that had failed on every Pacific island from Guadalcanal to Saipan. He had studied American tactics, particularly the devastating effectiveness of naval gunfire and airstrikes against exposed positions. His solution was revolutionary for Japanese forces: abandon the beaches, go underground, and force the Americans into a battle of attrition where firepower advantage meant nothing. The bunkers his engineers constructed were masterpieces of defensive architecture. Firing ports were designed to be invisible from more than 30 feet away. Multiple openings allowed defenders to shoot from different angles without exposing themselves. Reinforced concrete roofs were covered with volcanic rock that made them indistinguishable from the surrounding terrain. Internal chambers included ammunition storage, medical facilities, sleeping quarters, and multiple escape tunnels. The typical Japanese bunker on Iwo Jima was built like this: 5-foot-thick reinforced concrete walls, a roof capable of surviving 16-inch naval shells, firing ports positioned to provide interlocking fields of fire with adjacent positions, and access tunnels that allowed defenders to evacuate when a position became untenable, only to reappear 50 yards away in a connected bunker. American forces discovered these positions the hard way. Infantry advancing across open ground would suddenly be cut down by machine gun fire from positions they had passed minutes earlier. Flamethrower teams would approach what appeared to be a sealed cave, only to be killed by fire from a hidden port 20 feet to the left. Artillery would pulverize a hillside, and when Marines advanced, they would find the defenders completely unharmed in chambers 15 feet underground. Private First Class Robert Leader, a demolitions specialist with the 3rd Pioneer Battalion, described the bunkers in a letter home that was published in his hometown newspaper after the battle. "We'd blast one entrance with satchel charges, think we'd sealed it, then get shot at from the same position an hour later. They had tunnels behind tunnels. We were fighting an enemy that could disappear into the rock like ghosts." The standard American infantry tactics that had worked on every previous island were failing. Grenades couldn't reach the firing ports from safe distances. Flamethrowers required getting within 30 feet, which meant crossing a killing zone under direct observation. Bazookas and recoilless rifles couldn't penetrate the reinforced concrete. Artillery and naval gunfire could suppress positions temporarily, but couldn't destroy them permanently. The Marines needed precision weapons operated by men with patience measured in hours, not minutes. They needed shooters who could identify a firing port 4 inches wide at 200 yards. They needed snipers. The Marine Corps had learned hard lessons about specialized marksmanship in the previous island campaigns. The Japanese had employed snipers effectively throughout the Pacific, inflicting disproportionate casualties and psychological damage. American forces had responded by developing their own sniper programs, drawing on training methods that dated back to World War I and even the American Civil War. By February 1945, each Marine division included scout sniper platoons, specialized units of 24 to 32 men trained in long-range marksmanship, target identification, field craft, and forward observation. These weren't recreational target shooters given rifles. They were carefully selected riflemen who had demonstrated exceptional marksmanship, patience, and the psychological capability to kill deliberately at distances where the enemy's face was visible through the scope. The 4th Marine Division Scout Sniper Platoon that landed on Iwo Jima was commanded by First Lieutenant John Little, a pre-war competitive shooter from Pennsylvania who had trained at the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School at Camp Lejeune. His men carried primarily M1903A4 Springfield rifles, bolt-action weapons fitted with 8-power Unertl scopes, capable of accurate fire to 800 yards in the hands of a trained marksman. Some carried M1C Garand rifles, semi-automatic weapons with 2.5 power scopes that sacrificed range for rate of fire. These were used for closer engagements where rapid follow-up shots mattered more than extreme precision. The ammunition was specially manufactured match-grade .30-06 cartridges with 173-grain boat-tail bullets. Each round was inspected for consistency. The powder loads were measured to tolerances of 1/10 of a grain. The result was ammunition capable of grouping within 2 inches at 200 yards, 4 inches at 400 yards, and 8 inches at 600 yards when fired from a stable position by a trained shooter. But Iwo Jima presented problems these men had never encountered in training. The volcanic terrain offered almost no concealment. The black and gray ash provided no color variation for camouflage. The landscape was utterly devoid of vegetation, trees, or natural cover. The volcanic vents created heat shimmer that distorted optical sights. The constant wind off the ocean carried volcanic ash that fouled rifle mechanisms and optics. And the enemy was almost completely invisible. The shooters. February 21st, 1945. 0545 hours. Forward observation post, 300 yards north of airfield number 1. Corporal Anthony Palermo of the 4th Division Scout Sniper Platoon had been staring through his Unertl scope for 2 hours. His spotting partner, Private First Class Eugene Sledge, was glassing the same hillside with 7x50 binoculars. They had identified 3 probable bunker locations based on terrain analysis and previous contact reports. They hadn't seen a single Japanese soldier. Palermo was 23 years old, from Chicago, and had been shooting competitively since age 14. His Marine Corps marksmanship qualification score was 239 out of 250, expert rifleman with scores that put him in the top 2% of the Corps. He had graduated from Scout Sniper School with marks that qualified him as an instructor. None of that training had prepared him for Iwo Jima. The selection process for Marine Scout snipers was deliberately brutal. Candidates were drawn from infantry units and required to demonstrate expert marksmanship as a baseline qualification. From there, they underwent additional screening that tested patience, psychological stability, physical endurance, and the specific mental qualities required for deliberate, cold-blooded killing at range. Training lasted 8 weeks and covered skills that regular infantry never learned. Range estimation using mil-dot reticles and comparative sizing. Ballistic compensation for wind, temperature, altitude, and even the Coriolis effect at extreme ranges. Camouflage construction using local materials. Movement techniques that allowed a man to cross 100 yards of open ground in an hour without being detected. Observation methods that could identify a fighting position by shadow angles and vegetation disturbance. But the most important training was psychological. Snipers had to kill deliberately, not in the heat of close combat, but with time to see the target's face, study his movements, and squeeze the trigger during the natural respiratory pause between breaths. Many excellent marksmen failed this psychological requirement. The Marine Corps instructors could teach shooting. They couldn't teach the specific mindset required to watch a man through a scope for hours, then kill him when he made a single mistake. The weapons these men carried were precision instruments. The M1903A4 Springfield was essentially a World War I-era design refined for accuracy. The barrel was free-floated, meaning it didn't touch the stock except at the receiver. This prevented pressure points that would deflect the barrel as it heated. The trigger was adjustable down to 2.5 pounds of pull weight. The Unertl scope was mounted on external bases that returned to zero after removal and reinstallation, allowing the rifle to be disassembled for transport. The scope itself was a marvel of 1940s optical engineering. 8-power magnification with a field of view of 12 feet at 100 yards. The reticle used a post and crosshair design that allowed precise aiming at extended ranges. The tube was nitrogen purged to prevent internal fogging. The adjustment turrets provided 1/4 minute of angle clicks, allowing the shooter to dial exact corrections for range and wind. Palermo's rifle had been zeroed at 300 yards. At that distance, his point of aim and point of impact were identical. Beyond 300 yards, he had to hold high or dial elevation adjustments. Below 300 yards, he had to hold low or dial down. Every sniper memorized his ballistic data. At 100 yards, hold 6 inches low. At 200 yards, hold 2 inches low. At 400 yards, hold 12 inches high. At 600 yards, hold 48 inches high. But those calculations assumed ideal conditions: no wind, 59-degree temperature, sea level altitude. Iwo Jima offered none of those conditions. The volcanic terrain created unpredictable wind patterns. The black sand absorbed solar radiation, creating temperature variations of 30 degrees between ground level and 6 feet above. The volcanic ash in the air degraded optical clarity. The shimmer from underground thermal vents made ranging calculations unreliable. And the targets weren't standing in the open at measured distances. They were firing from concealed positions through ports 4 inches wide, appearing for seconds before vanishing back into the volcanic rock. There, Sledge whispered, his binoculars locked on a position 280 yards northeast. Palermo shifted his scope. At first, he saw nothing. Then he caught it, a shadow that didn't match the surrounding rock. A firing port, maybe 6 inches wide, positioned at ground level on what appeared to be solid hillside. He settled his crosshairs on the shadow and waited. 3 minutes later, movement. A helmet appeared in the port for perhaps 2 seconds, then withdrew. Confirmed bunker, Palermo whispered. Mark it. Sledge marked the position on the terrain sketch, a hand-drawn map showing landmarks, ranges, and suspected enemy positions. This map would be passed to company headquarters, then to artillery forward observers and supporting arms coordinators. The bunker would be targeted with 75mm recoilless rifle fire, flamethrowers, or demolitions depending on available assets and tactical priorities. But that would take hours, maybe a full day. Infantry pinned down by fire from that bunker couldn't wait hours. I've got the shot, Palermo said. The problem was timing. Snipers couldn't shoot at shadows or unopened firing ports. They needed a target, human flesh visible through the scope. On Iwo Jima, those targets appeared for seconds at most. The Japanese defenders had learned that exposure meant death. They fired in short bursts from positions with overhead cover, appeared only long enough to identify targets, then withdrew into the bunker interior where no American weapon could reach them. Palermo would have to wait until someone inside that bunker made a mistake. If nobody appeared, the position would have to be dealt with by other means, which meant Marines would die crossing the open ground in front of it. I can stay here all day, Palermo said to no one in particular. He was about to learn that on Iwo Jima, snipers didn't hunt from 600 yards in comfortable heights. They fought at distances where they could see their target's expressions. They worked in teams with flamethrower crews and demolition specialists. And they died at rates that would have horrified the training instructors back at Camp Lejeune. Innovation under fire. February 23, 1945. 1,420 hours. Northern face of Mount Suribachi. Sergeant Howard Chamberlain of the 5th Division Scout Sniper Platoon was doing something no training manual recommended. He was lying prone 40 yards from a Japanese bunker complex, watching firing ports through his M1903A4 scope, while a flamethrower team prepared to assault from his left flank. This was danger-close sniping. At 40 yards, if the Japanese spotted him first, he was dead. The bunker's machine guns could tear him apart before he could withdraw. But the flamethrower team needed his precision fire to suppress the firing ports while they closed the distance. They had already tried twice without sniper support. Both attempts had ended with Marines burning alive when Japanese gunners shot through the flamethrower fuel tanks. Chamberlain had been on Iwo Jima for 4 days. He had learned more about combat sniping in those 4 days than in 2 years of training. The first lesson: forget about 600-yard shots. The enemy was underground. Long-range precision fire was useless against targets you couldn't see. On Iwo Jima, snipers worked at distances of 50 to 200 yards, close enough to identify firing ports and small enough openings to matter. The second lesson, work with assault teams. Snipers weren't independent operators on this island. They were integrated into combined arms teams that included flamethrowers, demolitions, bazookas, and infantry. The sniper's job was to suppress enemy fire during the critical seconds when assault teams were exposed. The third lesson, innovate or die. Standard tactics weren't working. The snipers were developing field-expedient methods that would never appear in training manuals but were keeping Marines alive. One innovation involved communication wire. Marine wiremen were stringing telephone lines across the battlefield to maintain communications between forward units and command posts. Snipers discovered that these wires, stretched between 2 points at known distances, could be used as range-finding references. Corporal James Martin of the 4th Division Scout Sniper Platoon explained the technique in his post-battle debrief. We'd stretch wire between our position and a landmark at a measured distance, say 100 yards. Then we'd use the wire as a reference to estimate ranges to enemy positions. If a bunker was twice as far as the wire, we knew it was 200 yards. It sounds primitive, but it worked better than trying to range find through volcanic ash and heat shimmer. Another innovation involved camouflage construction. The volcanic terrain offered no natural concealment, so snipers created artificial positions using Japanese materials. Destroyed equipment, enemy bodies, volcanic rock, and captured camouflage nets were arranged to create hides that blended with the unnatural landscape of battle debris. Private First Class Robert Lang described building a hide in his combat journal. We used a destroyed Japanese gun carriage as overhead cover, packed volcanic ash around the sides, and positioned ourselves behind 2 dead Japanese soldiers. It sounds horrible, and it was, but it kept us invisible. We operated from that position for 6 hours, providing overwatch for 2 rifle companies. The psychological aspects of close-range sniping were brutal. At 600 yards, a target was an anonymous figure. At 40 yards, the target had a face. Snipers could see expressions, watch men eat, observe them talking with comrades. Then they had to kill them. Sergeant Lawrence Hicks, who served with the 3rd Division Scout Sniper Platoon during training before transferring to other duties, later wrote about the psychological cost. People think snipers are cold-blooded killers. The truth is more complicated. At close range, you see everything. You watch a man light a cigarette, laugh at something his buddy said, then you shoot him through the head. Some men could do it without hesitation. Others couldn't. The Corps tried to screen for this during selection, but you never really knew until combat. On Iwo Jima, the screening happened in combat. Some snipers discovered they couldn't kill at close range despite excellent marksmanship. Others found they could do it but paid a psychological price that would haunt them for decades. A few, the men who became legends, discovered they had a specific talent for this kind of killing. They could watch, wait, and execute without hesitation or remorse. Chamberlain was one of the latter. He had already accounted for 11 confirmed kills in 4 days, a rate that would have been impossible in conventional infantry combat. Now he watched the bunker firing ports through his scope, controlling his breathing, feeling the trigger's resistance against his finger. The flamethrower team was moving into position. In 30 seconds, they would begin their approach. Movement in the left firing port. A helmet, partially visible, then a face. Japanese machine gunner, probably in his early 20s, scanning for targets. Chamberlain's crosshairs settled on the visible portion of the man's face, approximately 3 inches of exposure. The range was 40 yards. At that distance, holdover was minimal, maybe half an inch low. Wind was negligible at close range. He pressed the trigger during the natural pause between heartbeats. The Springfield recoiled against his shoulder. Through the scope, he saw the result. The face disappeared, replaced by a spray of blood against the bunker's interior. The flamethrower team moved. 20 yards. 15 yards. 10 yards. Another port, right side. Another face. Chamberlain worked the bolt, ejecting the spent case and chambering a fresh round. The mechanical action took perhaps 1 second. The crosshairs found the new target. He fired. The flamethrower reached the bunker mouth. Liquid fire poured through the entrance, a stream of jellied gasoline burning at 2,000 degrees. Screaming erupted from inside the bunker, and human sounds that would feature in Chamberlain's nightmares for the rest of his life. But the bunker was silent. The machine guns that had killed 14 Marines over the previous 3 hours would never fire again. This was the new reality of Pacific War sniping. Not romantic lone wolf operations from concealed hides, but violent close-quarters collaboration with assault teams. The snipers provided precision suppression. The flamethrowers and demolitions provided final destruction. Together, they were solving the problem of Japanese bunkers one position at a time. The cost was brutal. Snipers on Iwo Jima suffered casualty rates approaching 40%. They were priority targets for Japanese defenders who understood that killing the sniper meant the assault teams were vulnerable. Counter-sniper operations were sophisticated, with Japanese marksmen specifically hunting for the Marines with scoped rifles. Chamberlain would survive Iwo Jima with 27 confirmed kills. He would never discuss the details with anyone outside his unit. 50 years later, at a veterans reunion, he would tell a historian, "We did necessary work. It saved Marine lives." That's all I'll say about it. The silencing. February 26, 1945. 0730 hours. Hill 362A, Central Highlands Sector. First Lieutenant John Little was coordinating the most ambitious sniper operation yet attempted on Iwo Jima. His 4th Division Scout Sniper Platoon, reinforced with additional sharpshooters from rifle companies, was providing overwatch for a battalion-sized assault on a fortified ridge complex that intelligence estimated contained 30 to 40 bunkers in a defensive network covering approximately 300 yards of frontage. The plan was simple in concept, nearly impossible in execution. 8 two-man sniper teams would position themselves in forward hides, identify bunker firing ports, and suppress enemy fire during the critical minutes when assault teams crossed open ground. Supporting them would be 81mm mortars for smoke screening, 75mm half-tracks for direct fire support, and flamethrower-equipped tanks. The operation began at 0800 hours with a 10-minute artillery preparation that dropped 400 rounds on the target area. The barrage accomplished almost nothing against the underground positions but created dust and smoke that allowed the sniper teams to move into forward positions. Corporal Anthony Palermo and his spotter, PFC Sledge, occupied a shell crater 150 yards from the Japanese line. Through his Unertl scope, Palermo could identify at least 6 firing ports in the volcanic rock face ahead. In peacetime conditions, these ports would have been invisible at this range. But Palermo had learned to read the landscape, subtle shadows that didn't match surrounding terrain, discoloration from muzzle blast residue, tiny variations in rock texture that indicated concrete construction behind volcanic camouflage. Port Alpha, 140 yards, bearing 015, Sledge whispered, using the nomenclature they had developed to coordinate observations. Probable Type 92 machine gun based on port dimensions. Palermo found the position in his scope. A rectangular opening approximately 8 inches wide by 4 inches high, positioned at ground level on what appeared to be natural rock face. The Japanese engineers had matched the concrete to the surrounding volcanic stone so precisely that the position was nearly invisible. The assault teams moved forward, advancing in short rushes across terrain that offered zero natural cover. Immediately, Japanese machine guns opened fire. Palermo identified the muzzle flash from Port Alpha. The machine gun was firing in short, disciplined bursts, 6 to 8 rounds per burst, textbook Japanese tactics designed to conserve ammunition and avoid revealing positions with sustained fire. Between bursts, a face appeared in the firing port for perhaps 1 second. The machine gunner, checking his field of fire. Palermo's crosshairs were already positioned. When the face appeared again, he fired. The Springfield's report was sharp and loud, unmistakable even amid the chaos of combat. Through the scope, Palermo confirmed the hit, the face disappeared, and the machine gun went silent. "Target neutralized," he said calmly, working the bolt to chamber another round. Across the battalion front, similar engagements were occurring. 8 sniper teams were identifying targets, engaging with precision fire, and suppressing enemy positions during the critical seconds when assault teams were most vulnerable. Sergeant William Daly, positioned 200 yards northeast of Palermo's location, was demonstrating why the Marine Corps had invested in semi-automatic sniper rifles. His M1C Garand, fitted with a 2.5 power scope, lacked the range and precision of the bolt-action Springfields, but at close ranges it offered a critical advantage: rapid follow-up shots. Daly identified 3 firing ports in a bunker complex that appeared to be mutually supporting positions with interlocking fields of fire. The ports were separated by approximately 10 yards, close enough that a single machine gun crew could service multiple positions by moving through connecting tunnels. When the assault teams advanced, all 3 ports opened fire simultaneously. Daly engaged the center position first, firing twice in rapid succession. The semi-automatic action allowed him to place 2 rounds through an 8-inch opening in less than 2 seconds. Both shots found flesh. The center port went silent. He shifted to the left port, fired 3 times as a target briefly appeared, then shifted right and fired twice more. All 3 positions were suppressed within 8 seconds, impossible with a bolt-action rifle. 3 ports, probable casualties all positions, Daly reported to his spotter. Assault team has clear path for next 30 seconds. The flamethrower teams and demolition specialists crossed the open ground during those 30 seconds. They reached the bunker entrances and delivered the final killing stroke, streams of burning gasoline that transformed concrete chambers into cremation ovens, and satchel charges that collapsed entrances and sealed occupants inside tombs of their own construction. By 0930 hours, the ridge was secured. Final count, 18 bunkers destroyed, estimated 200 to 250 enemy casualties, and, critically, Marine assault casualties 60% lower than similar operations conducted without sniper support. Lieutenant Little's after-action report documented the effectiveness. Scout sniper teams successfully suppressed enemy firing positions during assault team approaches, reducing exposure time to enemy fire by estimated 70 to 80%. Precision fire proved highly effective against bunker embrasures and firing ports at ranges 50 to 300 yards. Recommend increased allocation of scout sniper assets to infantry battalions conducting operations against fortified positions. But the report's clinical language couldn't capture the human reality. The snipers had killed at ranges where they could see faces, watch men die, and sometimes hear their final sounds. They had worked in exposed positions where Japanese counter-snipers hunted them specifically. They had integrated into assault teams in ways that training had never anticipated. And they had paid a price measured in blood and psychological trauma. During the Hill 362A operation, 2 snipers were killed and 3 were wounded. Corporal James Martin, the sniper who had developed the wire-ranging technique, was shot through the head by a Japanese counter-sniper while repositioning between heights. Private First Class Eugene Sledge, Palermo's spotter, took shrapnel from a mortar round that landed 3 feet from their position. He survived but lost vision in his left eye. The casualties were proportionally higher than regular infantry because snipers operated in exposed forward positions where they had to remain stationary for extended periods. They couldn't dive for cover when mortars fell. They couldn't displace rapidly when spotted. Their work required them to accept risks that would be tactically unacceptable for regular riflemen. But their effectiveness was undeniable. Post-battle analysis estimated that sniper-supported assaults suffered 40 to 60% fewer casualties than unsupported operations. In the brutal arithmetic of Iwo Jima, where the final casualty count would exceed 26,000 American casualties including 6,800 dead, that reduction meant thousands of Marines survived who would otherwise have died. The Japanese defenders recognized the threat. Captured documents and prisoner interrogations revealed that Japanese commanders had issued specific instructions regarding American snipers: identify them immediately, target them with all available weapons, and accept the loss of multiple soldiers to eliminate a single sniper. One captured document, later translated by Marine intelligence, stated, "The American precision shooters with magnified optics represent a threat beyond their individual capability. They enable assault teams to approach our positions with reduced casualties. Priority must be given to their elimination even at significant cost. A single American sniper killed is worth 10 ordinary infantry casualties from our perspective." The document continued with tactical instructions that revealed how seriously the Japanese took the sniper threat. Do not expose any portion of body or equipment through firing ports except during active engagement. Assign specific counter-sniper personnel equipped with captured American rifles and optics. Coordinate mortar fire on suspected American sniper positions even if exact location is uncertain. By early March, the battle for Iwo Jima was entering its final phase. The island's southern and central sectors were secured. The remaining Japanese defenders, perhaps 3,000 combat-effective troops, were compressed into the northern highlands, fighting from the last intact bunker complexes. The snipers continued their deadly work. The tactics developed during the first 2 weeks of battle had become doctrine: close-range precision fire integrated with assault team operations, systematic suppression of bunker firing ports, coordination with flamethrowers and demolitions, and acceptance of high casualty rates in exchange for reduced infantry losses. Corporal Palermo, now one of the senior surviving snipers, had 23 confirmed kills by March 10th. His Springfield rifle had fired approximately 150 rounds in combat, an average of 6.5 rounds per confirmed kill. For comparison, infantry studies estimated that regular riflemen fired 1,000 to 3,000 rounds per enemy casualty in Pacific combat. The precision of sniper fire wasn't just about marksmanship. It was about patience, observation, and understanding the specific vulnerabilities of fortified positions. Snipers learned that Japanese machine gunners had to expose themselves briefly while reloading, approximately every 200 rounds for a Type 92 heavy machine gun. They learned that bunker defenders preferred to fire during American advances when targets were plentiful, creating predictable windows when firing ports would be active. They learned that mortar and artillery fire, while ineffective at destroying bunkers, would force defenders to seal firing ports temporarily, creating opportunities for assault team movement. These lessons, paid for with Marine blood on Iwo Jima's volcanic slopes, would become foundational doctrine for the Marine Corps Scout Sniper program that exists to this day. Legacy in Blood. March 26, 1945. 1800 hours. Iwo Jima declared secured. Corporal Anthony Palermo sat on a pile of volcanic rock near Airfield No. 2, cleaning his M1903A4 Springfield for what felt like the 1,000th time. The rifle was fouled with volcanic ash, cordite residue, and blood, some of it his own from a shrapnel wound that had carved a groove across his left forearm on March 14th. The battle was over. The American flag flew from Mount Suribachi and had since February 23rd, though Japanese defenders continued fighting for days after the famous photograph was taken. The final cost was being calculated: 6,821 Americans dead, 19,217 wounded, casualties exceeding 30% of the landing force. Of the 21,000 Japanese defenders, only 216 had been taken prisoner. The rest died in their bunkers or in desperate final attacks when their positions became untenable. For the scout snipers of the 4th and 5th Marine Divisions, the price had been particularly brutal. Of the approximately 60 snipers who landed on D-Day, 24 were casualties, 9 killed, 15 wounded. A 40% casualty rate, nearly double the already horrific overall Marine casualty percentage. But their effectiveness had been proven beyond question. Post-battle analysis, conducted by Marine Corps schools and later published in classified tactical bulletins, documented what the snipers had accomplished. The numbers were stark, estimated 800 to 1,000 confirmed enemy kills by designated scout sniper personnel. Estimated 300 to 400 bunker firing ports suppressed or eliminated during assault operations. Estimated 2,000 to 3,000 Marine casualties prevented through precision fire support during company and battalion level attacks. The analysis went beyond body counts. It examined how integrated sniper operations had changed the dynamics of assaulting fortified positions. Prior to sniper support, assault teams crossing open ground under fire suffered casualty rates of 20 to 30% before reaching objectives. With sniper overwatch suppressing enemy firing positions during critical approach phases, casualty rates dropped to 8 to 12%. The tactical innovation that emerged from Iwo Jima would reshape Marine Corps doctrine. The concept of scout sniper teams integrated into infantry operations at company and battalion level became standard. The emphasis on close-range precision fire, 50 to 200 yards rather than 600-plus yards, became foundational training. The integration with flamethrower and demolition teams became formalized in tactical publications. But the human cost of these innovations was enormous and mostly invisible to everyone except the men who paid it. Lieutenant Colonel Justice M. Chambers, who commanded the 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines during the battle, wrote in his combat report about the snipers who supported his operations. These men operated under conditions that would break most infantry. They accepted exposure that we would never ask of regular riflemen. They killed deliberately, precisely, repeatedly, at ranges where they could see their targets' faces. The psychological burden of this work cannot be overstated. We owe them a debt that goes beyond recognition or decoration. The decorations were considerable. Of the 60 snipers, 11 received silver stars, 22 received bronze stars, and virtually all received Purple Hearts for wounds received in action. But medals couldn't address what they had experienced and what they carried home. Private First Class Donald Graves, who survived the battle despite wounds received on March 18, later described the psychological aftermath in an oral history interview conducted in 1995. People ask what it was like being a sniper. They expect stories about amazing shots, about skill and courage. What they don't understand is that we were killing men at distances where we could see their expressions. I killed a Japanese soldier who was eating rice. I watched him take 3 bites, then I shot him through the head. He was probably 19 years old. I was 20. I can still see his face 50 years later. The Marine Corps recognized that the psychological demands of sniper operations required specific support. Post-war studies examined combat stress reactions amongst scout sniper personnel and found that rates of what would later be called PTSD were significantly higher than regular infantry, even accounting for the higher casualty rates snipers experienced. The studies led to changes in selection, training, and post-deployment protocols. Psychological screening became more intensive. Training emphasized not just marksmanship but psychological preparation for the specific stresses of deliberate killing. Post-deployment debriefs began including mental health assessments. But in 1945, those protocols didn't exist. The snipers who survived Iwo Jima went home carrying trauma that most would never discuss outside their immediate units. The tactical legacy was clearer and more immediately applicable. The lessons learned on Iwo Jima influenced Marine Corps operations for the remainder of World War II and beyond. During the Okinawa campaign beginning in April 1945, scout sniper platoons were employed from D-Day using tactics refined on Iwo Jima. The results confirmed the effectiveness. Sniper-supported operations consistently achieved objectives with lower casualties than unsupported attacks. The doctrine continued evolving through the Korean War, where Marine snipers adapted Iwo Jima lessons to different terrain and enemy tactics. It influenced Army sniper programs during Vietnam. It shaped the modern Marine Corps Scout Sniper School curriculum where Iwo Jima case studies remain part of required instruction. Sergeant Howard Chamberlain, who survived the battle with 27 confirmed kills, never spoke publicly about his experiences until a 1998 interview with the Marine Corps History Division. His statement captured something essential about what the snipers had done and what it had cost them. People want to know about the shooting, about the techniques and the tactics. That's the easy part to talk about. The hard part is explaining what it does to you. We weren't fighting at 600 yards where the enemy is an anonymous target. We were fighting at distances where we could see them as human beings, then we had to kill them anyway. It was necessary work. It saved Marine lives. I'd do it again if I had to. but it changes you in ways that never heal completely. On March 27, 1945, the surviving snipers boarded ships for the return to Guam and rear area rest facilities. They left behind 24 of their brothers, buried in the 5th Marine Division cemetery at the base of Mount Suribachi. They also left behind something less tangible but equally significant, proof that precision marksmanship integrated into infantry operations could dramatically reduce casualties in the most difficult combat conditions. That lesson, purchased with blood on volcanic ash, would influence American military doctrine for generations. The specific individuals who fought as snipers on Iwo Jima are mostly forgotten now. Their names don't appear in the famous photographs or the popular histories. But their contribution, measured in Marine lives saved, enemy positions suppressed, and tactical innovations developed, was critical to victory on that 8-square-mile volcanic nightmare. Corporal Anthony Palermo returned to Chicago after the war. He worked as a machinist, raised a family, and rarely discussed his service. When he died in 1989, his obituary mentioned that he was a Marine veteran of Iwo Jima. It didn't mention that he was a scout sniper with 23 confirmed kills, or that he had been awarded the Silver Star for actions on March 2, 1945, when he suppressed 3 bunker positions during a company assault, remaining in position despite wounds that should have forced his evacuation. His rifle, the M1903A4 Springfield he carried through 36 days of combat, was donated to the National Museum of the Marine Corps. It sits now in a climate-controlled display case, a precision instrument that once dealt death at distances where the shooter could see his victim's face. The brass data plate attached to the display case reads, M1903A4 Springfield Sniper Rifle, carried by Corporal Anthony Palermo, 4th Marine Division Scout Sniper Platoon, Iwo Jima, February-March 1945. It doesn't mention the 23 men who died looking through the scope on the other end of that rifle. It doesn't mention the price Palermo paid for each of those shots. It doesn't mention the nights he woke screaming for 40 years after the war ended. Those details aren't on display. They're carried by families and buried in veterans' memories and archived in oral histories that few people read. But they're part of the legacy. A legacy written in blood on volcanic ash, purchased with trauma that lasted lifetimes, and memorialized in tactical doctrine that saves lives to this day. The snipers of Iwo Jima fought a different kind of war. They killed deliberately, precisely, at ranges where their targets had faces and names and families waiting home. They did necessary work. They saved lives. And they paid a price that most of us cannot comprehend. That's the story that needs to be told. Not just the tactics and the techniques, but the human cost of precision killing in the worst battle the Marine Corps ever fought.